Okay, the intent of this video is just to make it easier to understand the rules and the intent of this new fantasy football league. We're calling it the best league. So I'll try to summarize it. I know the document is a little intimidating, so I'll try to make this easier so you can just follow along as you're watching this if you like. So the intent is to make this the best league you've ever been in. And we want to have people in it who are wanting to be in the league for a long time, many years to come, and who are committed to stay engaged with their team and the league, not only during the football season, but during the off season as well. There's going to be some activities that we will break down as we go through this, but it's meant to make the league fun, not only during the fantasy football season, but during the off season, keep everybody engaged and chatting with each other. So we can all have fun as we go along, and we don't just kind of go our separate ways as the fantasy football season ends. So we all watch all kinds of sports. So we want to incorporate all those sports into this league and make it fun in the process. So without further ado, I'll scroll and hopefully you can see this well enough on the camera. So what makes this league special again? Draft and off-season rules can change year to year. The idea is to keep it fun and fresh and not just your boring, redraft league where you start with a new team every year and then at the end of the year it's over and then that's it. You forget about it. We want to have implications of season to season and, keep it fun and fresh. One of the big things is we will keep the rules and for scoring and roster formats the same so that it doesn't affect lineups and strategies over the years. We'll take polling from league members every year to get an idea of what people like and don't like so that it stays a good league and everybody's happy. Consistent communication, engagement, and participation from all members, so you won't have zombies in the league. At least that's the goal. We want to have people who are passionate about making this a good league. And then obviously you're going to have a commissioner in me who is passionate about ensuring that this is the best league you've ever joined. I want this to be, the league that you enjoy the most and the one that we can all kind of be buddies and I don't know, we can pal around and make fun of each other. So, half point PPR, 12-member league on ESPN. We'll have these are some of the highlights and expectations. Don't expect this to be the best video ever. We'll have a trophy every year, and the league or the playoff champion will sign it every year. So every year, be a new signature, and we'll be able to reflect on years past and see who won and who's terrible. The draft will always be an in-person draft and will always be the Sunday before the start of the NFL season at 6 o'clock Eastern time. So you can join in person. You can also join via video chat if you're out of town, but the goal is for this to be in person and for everybody to get to know each other. And, we've done in-person drafts before and it's always the most fun. So it will be the Sunday before the draft or before the start of the season at 6 every year. So you know when it is and you know to plan around it. You don't have to wonder when it's going to be. So there shouldn't be any excuses for not being able to attend. 16 playoffs. The number 1 and 2 seeds will get a bye. There's a $75 annual entry due 1 week after the end of the last event of the Best League Challenge cycle. So now you're asking, what the heck is the Best League Challenge? Well, we'll get into it. So the total pot is $900. $600 goes to the playoff champion. $150 goes to the Best League Challenge winner to purchase a new jersey for their favorite player of their favorite team. Again, we'll get into it. $75 to the second place in the playoffs, $75 to the regular season points leader. So even if it's possible that you can have a not great win-loss record for some reason, but you have a great, point scored record, you can still get your money back from the entry fee. Rosters, pretty straightforward. It's going to be standard across the board. Only difference is that there's 2 flex spots, no kickers, and there's going to be 2 IR spots. So you can IR your people that you want to keep. 18 total roster spots, including 7 bench spots. Standard scoring across the board for all positions, including defense, except that it's a half-point PPR. Waiver wire will be standard waiver wire rules that you're probably used to. We're thinking about incorporating a FAB system in the future, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So Best League Challenge. So the best league will be made up of off-season and in-season challenges, and each challenge will have a point system to determine a ranking, which will do two things. It'll determine who wins the jersey and who wins the draft order kind of ranking challenge. So the member who has the most points in the best league challenge will get the jersey and will have their choice of where they draft in the upcoming fantasy draft. So again, we'll get into that a little bit more here. What are the challenges? So again, some of them are off-season challenges and some of them are in-season challenges. And then, one last postseason thing. So we're going to incorporate the NCAA men's basketball tournaments, the Home Run Derby, opening day, the Masters, NBA Finals, and then we'll have in-season rivalry weeks, in-season teams weeks, and then we'll do postseason polling. And all of those different events and challenges will, have a point system that will have an overall yearly ranking to determine who wins the jersey and who wins the number one pick to choose where they're going to draft. So Commissioner will track points for the Best League Challenge and provide regular updates as the events come and go. Any ties will be decided by a coin flip. So the challenges themselves. The tournament, we'll have a group in ESPN Tournament Challenge. You'll submit a bracket, and whoever has the most points gets the most points. So first place is going to get 12 points. Second place is going to 11 points, and so on. Pretty straightforward. MLB opening day, we'll all submit guesses to how many strikeouts are thrown by all MLB pitchers on opening day. One guess per person, blah, 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 blah. Whoever is the closest gets 12 points, next closest gets 11, and so on. The Masters will have guesses for how many birdie strokes are hit on the final day of the Masters by every contestant remaining on the final day. So the total amount of all the contestants' birdie strokes for the entire day will submit a guess before the day starts. Whoever has the most gets 12, and so on. NBA Finals will have a guess for how many points per game the Finals MVP will have by the end of the Finals. That's just going to be determined by who's the closest. 12 points to number one, and so on again. MLB Home Run Derby is going to be the total amount of home runs that are hit in the entirety of the Home Run Derby by all competitors. So in every round, all competitors, all home runs hit total. Whoever's closest gets 12 points. Next closest gets 11, and so on. And that's and you can see that it's all pretty much chronological. That's the way I structured it anyway. April, June, July, then July. Then we'll have the in-season events. We'll have rivalry weeks, which is a tough word to say, rivalry. We'll have 2 different weeks where matchups across the entire league will be between you and your assigned rival. Winners of rivalry weeks will either choose to gain 5 points towards their best league challenge rankings, or they can remove 5 points from their rivals' best challenge rankings in case they just want to say, screw you, you lose 5 points. So add a little heat to the rivalry. And then the teams, the fantasy teams, is basically the way that's going to work. 2 weeks per year, league members will be divided into 4 separate teams. During those weeks, their team's cumulative scored will go toward, it'll be measured against the other quote-unquote teams. And whichever team has the most cumulative points will earn 5 points toward their best league challenge rankings. So you can encourage some collaboration between you and your quote-unquote teammates in case, maybe one team's struggling on for bye weeks, so they got some injuries or something, but you're in the lead when it comes to the best league challenge, and you want to make sure that your teammates have a good week. So maybe you trade them a good player to try to help them out, get them some more points. So encourages a little bit more collaboration strategy on that front. League polling at the end of the year, we'll have a poll for the highlights of the season, including best and worst midseason trades, highest point totals in a week, best waiver wire pickup, best draft pick, all those kinds of things. Winners for each poll will just get 5 points towards their best league challenge rankings. That's my dog's a bit crazy. Best league challenge. So if you are not responsive, like if you don't put in a guess or a wager for any of the events, then you're going to lose 10 points towards your rankings. So you don't want to not respond. You want to be engaged. Again, we want to have people who are paying attention and being, contributing members to the league. We don't want people who are zombies. Draft rules, again, in person. We already hit the dates and everything. You can join virtually or in person. If you can't attend for whatever reason, then the league members will select your team for you by popular vote. Each pick is 90 seconds. The final rankings of the Best League Challenge will determine the order in which members choose their position in the draft. So if I win the Best League Challenge, I get the number one choice. I may choose to pick fourth in the draft. So I'm like, you know what? I want to pick fourth. That spot is taken. That one's mine. Then whoever got second place is like, you know what? All right, well, I'll take first overall pick. So then the second person in the Best League Challenge rankings will get the second overall pick, and so on. So you get to choose where you want to draft. Somebody's strategy is like, you know what? I don't want the first overall pick because then I have to wait forever for my next pick. That's totally up to them. And it gives a little bit more control over what your draft is going to become. Trade rules, pretty straightforward. Trade deadlines during week 12, no limits, 5 vetoes needed, review periods 1 day. Divisions, there's not going to be any divisions. Everybody's ranked against each other. If there's a tie, highest points gets into the playoffs. We already hit the bye weeks. All right, keepers. Keepers are a little bit more complicated. So we're going to allow 2 keepers per year from the previous season's roster. You can choose to keep a specific player more than one season. Choosing to keep one player versus 2 players will have a different impact to your draft picks, and choosing to keep a player over multiple seasons will also become more and more costly. So the intent, again, as you can see, the intent is to make it so that you're drafting your players that you love and that you want to cheer for, and you can keep them on your team for years and years to come, and accept that it's going to become more costly. And you may decide at some point it's too costly and you don't want to keep them anymore. It's totally up to you. There's rules for every scenario when it comes to keeping. So how it works, you may only keep a player that you drafted from the previous season and was on your roster at the end of the season. So you have to have drafted them and they're still on your roster at the end. So different examples for each scenario. Keeping one player for the first time, you will surrender the draft pick for the round you drafted the player in the previous season. So if this is your first time you drafted somebody, the next season, if you want to keep them, if you drafted them in the 7th round, then the next year you surrender your 7th round pick for that player. If you want to keep 2 players, both of them for the first time, you'll surrender the first round draft pick for the player you selected lower in the draft. You will then surrender the draft pick for the players you selected higher in the draft in the round that they were chosen. So the example that I gave is a member drafts a player in the 4th and 9th round that they both want to keep them both. They'll surrender the 4th round pick because this one is a higher round pick, so they'll surrender the 4th pick for this player, but they'll surrender their 1st round pick for this player, the 9th round pick. So whoever's higher, that one, you'll surrender that round. Whoever's lower, you're surrendering your 1st round pick for that player. Keeping one player for multiple years, you will surrender the pick 2 rounds earlier in the draft than you picked the previous year. So example is, again, you're keeping one player for multiple years. So if a member keeps a player in the 6th round or drafts a player in the 6th round and they want to keep them the following season, the first season they'll surrender their 6th round pick just like normal. The second season they keep them, they'll surrender their 4th round pick. It's 2 rounds more expensive. The third season they'll surrender the 2nd pick, and then the 4th season going forward it'll cost their 1st round pick. So it becomes 2 rounds more expensive for every year that you choose to keep them. Keeping 2 players over multiple years is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So again, you'll surrender your 1st round pick for the lower drafted player, and then the second year you keep the same player, you'll surrender the pick 2 rounds earlier than the pick you surrendered before, and it'll continue until it becomes a 1st round pick. That's pretty straightforward. It pretty much mirrors keeping it 2 players up here. Just 2 rounds earlier if you keep them for multiple years. Now, it becomes more complicated. Will's texting me. Bye-bye. If a member chooses to keep one of the players they had previously kept multiple seasons and not keep one of the other player, they will surrender their 1st round pick for the player they kept in the later round and will surrender the draft pick in the same round they drafted the player in the higher round. Now, that's a lot of words. So, examples are helpful in this. A member drafts example of keeping the same 2 players multiple years. A member drafts 2 players in a season and want to keep both of them for multiple seasons. one player was drafted in the 10th round and another was drafted in the 5th, the first year they will surrender their first round pick to keep the player drafted in the 10th round, which is the same as before. They'll surrender the 5th round pick for the first year. Then the next year, if they want to keep him again, they'll surrender their 3rd round pick in replacement of this one and their 1st round pick because they are surrendering that for the 10th round pick. Now, example of keeping 2 players multiple years, then changing one of them. If a member decides they want to keep them for multiple seasons, player A was drafted for the first time in round 4, and player B was drafted for the first time in round 8. 2 years after they took the players for the first time, they chose to not keep player A and are now going to keep player C, who they took in their 10th round pick. They'll surrender their 1st round pick for player C because he was lower, and they'll surrender their 4th round pick for player B because they will have drafted player B in the 6th round the previous year because it was the first season that they were kept. So basically, every year that you keep a player, it becomes 2 rounds more expensive for the higher round drafted player, and then the lower round, if you keep a second one for multiple years, it costs your 1st round pick each time. So I know that's a lot to think about, but if you think about it as keeping multiple players, the lower draft position is always going to cost your 1st. Then the higher drafted position will always cost at least that round. If it's multiple seasons, it'll be 2 rounds earlier each year you keep them. So that's pretty much it. That's all we've got for the directions. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I know this has been a long video-ish, but I think that this will be a really great league, and we're hopeful that you can join.